Welcome, everybody. Thanks for attending our speaker series wrap-up tonight. I'm Carolyn Merrick, program coordinator here at the center, and I'd like to thank you for attending. And this will be a very dynamic series tonight, and we have breakout rooms planned for you with questions. And thank you to Enid Krieger for setting this up. Enid, would you like to say a few words before Bob begins?
I don't think I'll take up too much time now. I have some words at the end.
Okay, great. All
So
right.
I think we should move along, let Bob get started because it's 5:32.
All right. Thank you. And here's Bob to take us on this journey.
Thank you, Carolyn. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for attending this final session of the Center's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion series. We've heard from 5 enlightening speakers: Susan Bro, Dr. Elaine Schmidt, Kaki Dimok, Allison Linney, and Charlene Green. We've learned from their experience, their knowledge, and their wisdom. We have listened together in this series with all of you, over 200 members of our community. Today, we will hear more from you. This is an opportunity to hear more of your ideas and your recommendations. To help us think about this important topic, Charlene Green will first review the Center's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion series that we have shared over the past month. Charlene, thank you for being here today, and you may begin.
Thank you so much, Bob. And again, I want to thank Carolyn and Enid and everyone on the diversity committee for organizing this particular series. I come from a background of where dialogue and being able to sit down and talk to each other is important. That can't be the only thing that we do, but definitely sitting down and talking with each other is very, very important. And so the way that in which the series was set up, I think really gave us an opportunity to think about the thread that is woven through all of the conversations, all the presentations that you heard. And so because I think about this all of the time, not just because it's my job, but because it's these are topics that impact my life in a very personal way. I give a lot of brain energy and thought to constantly thinking about how do I make sense of all of this. And so I hope that this is what you see the series doing for you. It's not just this way of enlightening you in different on different topics that you may not have thought about, but it's giving you an opportunity to truly think about how you're making sense of all this. And so so I'm going to start with Dr. Elaine Schmidt's talk. Even though she wasn't the first one, I feel like there were some foundational things that she brought up that I think is very important to us thinking about, you know, how do we create this this box that makes sense to us. And because she talked about the origins of racial categories, she brought up some things regarding social scientists and how they assign value to skin color and the political implications to that, and how that had some very real implications for people of color, and how that gave white folks in the United States an opportunity to think about where white folks fell in that level of importance in thinking about what it means to be white, and how also the whole aspect of valuing skin color has led to what I would describe as a genocide of groups of people, when, you know, it may not have happened all at once, in one short period of time. But when you look at the things that laws that are in place that are based on racial definitions allow things to happen, whether it's connected to health or the criminal justice system, that has some, that should give us reason to stop and think about what is going on here, that, you know, how are we implicitly and complicitly participating in an aspect of oppression that allows this to happen. And so the laws that were put in place, whether it's about the Racial Integrity Act, which really in the state of Virginia allowed the definition of racial categories to truly put people in their place, especially colored people, as it was defined by white folks. And how, because of those laws not changing until the late 1960s, how we're still dealing with the implications of that. Just last year, the state of Virginia decided to drop asking people who were looking for marriage licenses to not have to put their identify themselves racially. And that goes back to the Racial Integrity Act, and how if you were, because they didn't want the races to mix, that was their way of making sure that they were documenting that. And just last year, the state of Virginia decided, okay, we're not going to ask that on of anyone who's applying for a marriage license. Because there are a whole host, and it didn't happen in every county or every city, but it was on the books in the state of Virginia. And so we've got some hard conversations to still participate in, but understanding the origins of racial categories and how that has an impact on the conversations we're still having today is critical, I think, to helping us, no matter what your ethnic background is, to understand and make sense of this conversation, this dialogue around race and ethnicity. So that was Dr. Elaine Schmidt and her her talk that gave us an opportunity to put some things in perspective. And then Susan Burrow kicked it off, and Susan, I think, gave again participants in this series an opportunity to also think about, well, what is white privilege, and why should I care about that? And I really appreciate the way she took a very personal reflection on how white privilege and understanding what it meant to be white, what it means to be white for her growing up has impacted the way she understands what white privilege is for her today, and how that has impacted her work today, as it how it's impacted her as a teacher, and how she, I think, continues the important reason why her daughter Heather got involved with wanting to see things change. And so asking about those personal understandings and having her reflect on how she connected the dots, I think really gave us an opportunity to hear what white privilege means to her. And that's where I think, if you're white, I think that's a super important conversation that you need to have with yourself in thinking about the historical implications of race, and how our politicians and our scientists have defined what that looks like. And then how does that defining of race and ethnicity, skin color, impacted our understanding of what we think white privilege is about? And whether you're calling it white privilege or white advantage or white entitlement, however you're defining it, you need to think about, well, how does this impact me? What do I need to know about how white privilege affects my day-to-day activities in the places that I have access to, or as a person of color may not have access to? What does that mean for your family members? Because that's where the rubber meets the road, right? If you've had the advantage or the privilege of not having to think about what it means to be white, then it starts to really hit home when it becomes personal. And I think that leads us into some of the conversation that Kaki got into with getting comfortable with being uncomfortable, because we can't just pat ourselves on the back with feeling like we're knowing more information. Our awareness level is now increasing, and so that then makes you feel good about, well, I know stuff, so now I'm comfortable with that. Where we need to be, and where Kaki was making some pointed implications of, is that notion of needing to get uncomfortable with what it means to be who you are, what it means, what are the things that you don't know or understand that you need to connect more with, to ask yourself, what is it that I'm afraid of? Or what are my concerns about what it means to be white? I know some of the conversations that I've had as an educator with some of the young people that I've worked with are the kinds of things that the statements that they make that just, make you want to sit down and bawl your eyes out because of the pain that you see them experiencing, especially when you have especially Black boys who will say to you without any kind of prompting that, I wish I were white. They'll say, Miss Green, I wish I were white, because if I was white, then my teachers would care about me more. I wouldn't be looked at as the problem child in the classroom. I don't think I'm the problem child, but because I think of my skin color, the teachers think I'm bad. And when you have kids making statements like that, we need to sit down and take a step back and ask those hard conversations. How did we get to this place? And what do we need to do to help a child who makes a statement like that understand that they are valued, that they are a human being who is valued, who is loved, and that it because of their skin color, that here are the ways in which the people who are connected to, who look like you, have done amazing things in the world, and specifically in Charlottesville, to help them feel good about themselves. And so if we're not willing to get uncomfortable in having those kinds of conversations about and care about the people who don't come from the same experiences and backgrounds that you come from, then this is always going to be a wedge issue. This is always going to be a life and death issue. This is always going to be something that we are trying to break through and break down, because we're just okay with staying in our circle of comfort. And we're, as human beings, we don't always want to step out of that circle and make ourselves uncomfortable. We live to be comfortable. And so being willing to address that and think about that, and think about, you know, if the world was flipped, how would I feel if I had to ask a question about what does it mean to be Black to me, or what does it mean to be Latinx or Asian, or any of the ways in which we haven't experienced. That thread for me comes out of that reflection of comfort and discomfort in me asking the question, well, what kind of relationships do I have? And that's where Alice and Lenny did a wonderful job of asking the question, do you have Black friends, or do you just know Black people, right? Because that's where the level of comfort really meets the road, the rubber meets the road in trying to think about, you know, who's in my phone book? If I were to open my phone, if you were to open your phone right now, how many people of color are in your contact list? And this is a question I ask people all the time in talking about implicit bias and thinking about what that means for you and whether or not you think you're biased in any way. You know, if you were to think about the top 3, maybe 5 people in your life that you go to on a regular basis, that you trust, that you seek information and advice about, who's in that list? Who's on that list? Do they all look like you? Are they different based on religion, sexual orientation, gender identity, socioeconomic status, possibly even education level, or even ethnicity? And so I think that's something to reflect on, especially as we're trying to figure out how we will relate to people. What kind of relationships do we have? And especially if you have kids, when you think about how you want your kids to, you want to be the model for the people in your life. You want to be able to say you're walking the talk, right? And so do you have Black friends, or do you have friends of color, or do you just know people of color? Do you know Black people? Oftentimes that kind of question doesn't really hit home for some folks until it's in your backyard and a family member, a grandchild. I think about my father-in-law right now, whose daughter, whom I'm married to, you know, he has a biracial grandson who's half Black and half white. And then his son's kids are half white and half Chinese. And so, so we have all kinds of interesting questions and conversations about what is life like for his grandkids as they're growing up and making sense of things, and what about their safety, and what about how they feel about themselves in the larger picture, and how can they be supportive of the ways in which they're trying to express themselves and be who they are. And so, so Allison, I think, gave us a lot to think about in terms of thinking about the relationships that we have with people. And I think those should constantly be the things that you ask yourself, especially if it's connected to family. But if it's not connected to family, about the people you think you care about. How diverse is that list? And then And then I tried to tie some of those things together and thinking about, well, if I have this understanding historically of what of how our politicians and our scientists have defined for us what those boxes need to say as we check them off, whether it's, you know, for whatever reason that our local government and our state government and our federal governments are asking us to check those boxes for. And I have this understanding, this foundation historically of how I think we've gotten to this point. And I'm tying those connections with what it means to be white. What does it mean to be Black? And what does it mean to be biracial? And asking all those questions about what does that mean and how do I understand that? And making sure that I do. And then thinking about how do I leverage what it means to be white and the privilege associated and the advantages that I see associated with being white so that we get to that place of change. Because like I said in the beginning, where whiteness or understanding all of this and having the dialogue is important, but what's even more important are the actionable steps we take to make change. And understanding how do I think about how whiteness might get in the way and maximizing that from a personal perspective, especially as it relates to my safety, and then from an institutional perspective and thinking about social justice and who sometimes needs to be the messenger in talking about change, because it's heard differently from me as opposed to someone like Bob Garrity, for instance, as I talked about. So lots of questions that I hope are constantly on your list of things to talk about and try to answer regarding what does it mean to be who we are? And if we really, truly care about people, now that I know better, how can I be better? And so I hope in your small groups, I know Bob has got a list of questions for you all to focus on. But as you talk about those things, I also want you to keep in mind, what are those actionable ways, whether it's a very personal way or a very organized way that I can help affect change. And so I'm going to stop there. And Bob, I'm going to turn it back over to you. And I want to thank you all for allowing me to help put this all in context.
Thank you, Charlene. Thanks for coming again tonight to share this review that you did so nicely to touch it, bring them all together. And thank you for speaking last week here in the series. So in a few minutes, we're going to set up some breakout rooms for small group discussions for you to participate with each other in small groups. Each room will be hosted by a scribe, and they're going to pose 3 questions to you. And Charlene has just charged us to think about more questions as we go. First question, what have you learned from the series? Another question, what would you recommend as next steps for the center to take to address diversity, equity, and inclusion? As Charlene was just saying, actionable steps. What can the center do to address diversity, equity, and inclusion? And again, thinking of actionable steps, what action steps do you recommend for the greater community outside the center, not just the center, to take to address diversity, equity, and inclusion? in your small groups, your scribes will invite you to answer these questions, think about them, and talk about them. Well, welcome back, everyone. Thank you for participating in the breakout rooms and sharing your thoughts on the different questions. So what we'd like to do is just sort of do a little polling going around the rooms, and I'll name the scribes. And if you would tell us one comment that was made on the topic of question number 1, what have you learned in this series?
Hey, Bob, it's hard to hear you.
Oh, not sure why. Can you hear me now?
I mean, yes, but you're quiet.
Go closer.
Okay, I've got a microphone on my wire here. Let me take this off and see if that works.
I'm hearing him okay.
Okay.
Hear me? Okay, Sharon, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Better.
Not Frank?
It was better with the headphones, actually.
Yeah, sorry about that.
We have to use the technology as we need it. Thank you, Vincent, for your technological support.
No.
Use your outside voice, Bob.
Say again, Sharon?
Use your outside voice.
Okay. Sorry. So what we'd like to do is do a little poll of the breakout rooms, and I'll name the scribes. And would you tell us one item, one comment that was made on question number 1, the question of what have you learned in this series? So let's start with Mary and Galloway. Tell us one thing that you learned.
Okay, I'm reporting out for our group, and I think in question number 1, the predominant theme was that there was the whole series was such an incredibly good review of race issues, and really people learned more about the individuals, speakers. That the race issue is simple, and yet it is extremely complex, and it's hard to put it into actionable.
Hey, thank you, Mary. All right, Bev Warren, could you give us one comment on question 1?
Sure. Our group really felt as if the entire series was a good first step, and that is learning. We're all learning, particularly learning to keep an open mind, to not be judgmental, and seek first to listen.
Thank you, Bev. John and Diane, could you give us one comment on question number 1?
I was taking notes on that first one, and one of the comments was that a participant became greatly more aware of language and how language might inadvertently become a microaggression. So she was much more attuned to that.
Great. Thank you, John. And Virginia and Jean, Virginia Porter and Jean Foss, do you have a comment for question number 1? That may be one of the groups that consolidate. Oh, there they are, Virginia and Jean, popping up at the same time.
Jean, if you're talking, you're muted. If you can unmute yourself, Jean is going to respond.
Thank you. There we go.
All right. Okay. One of our comments was that if you want to have diverse friends from lots of different, well, at least from other cultures and other groups that are different from you, you need to go where they are to get to meet them. And that we felt that one of the things that friendships that are made should be made slowly and be realistic and real, not just checking them off that you've met certain groups of people. They should be on a one-to-one basis and be well, whatever. I think I'm done. Sorry.
Thank you, Jean and Virginia. Ashby and Marie Baker.
Is Marie there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, she's our spokesperson.
Okay, Marie Coles Baker, let's hear from you.
That would be me. Some of these questions people started to answer and overlap, but I think for this one, I could pick out one that's perhaps not quite much more related to the topic, is that they really learned so much from each of the speakers and appreciated the history, particularly of how race got started. It was just kind of a different and whole new perspective.
Thank you, Marie.
Mm-hmm.
And Khaki Price.
And I was lucky enough to land in Enid's group. And so Enid acted as our scribe. So I'll pass it on to Enid.
Oh. Okay. You know, I forgot that you were a scribe, Khaki. Okay, so so many good things came out of our group. Lots of good suggestions, but the one that stood out that I'm going to share is that saying that you're not racist is not enough. Unless you're an anti-racist, you really are.
Thank you, Enid. Sharon Petro.
Again, our group thought that it was a phenomenal series. And one thing that came out was listening to the personal experiences of the speakers in the series. That was very, they were very impressed, and that they can still learn new things at our age.
Great. Thank you, Sharon. And Vincent Walker.
Yes. So I actually have 3 quick hits. The first was, it seems like everyone enjoyed the series. We thoroughly enjoyed the speaker series and just was appreciative of it. Also, Susan Bro opened eyes is one of the comments that I've taken from one of the answers. And the third is Allison Linney's presentation was brave. A lot of people seem to appreciate her presentation as well. So those are the quick hits that I have for you guys.
Thank you, Vincent.
No problem.
And then Linda Dukes.
One person in our group has been studying and self-reflecting for about a year on these topics. And one of the things she got out of the series was how much she still doesn't know. We are always learning how much more there is to learn.
Thank you, Linda. Meredith Gunter.
Thank you. Whoops, wait a minute. My screen just, when I unmuted myself, my notes, can you come back to me? My notes disappeared when my screen.
We'll come back to you.
Thank you.
Is there any scribe that I missed that we want to hear from?
Patty Carey.
Patty Carey, go ahead.
This kind of goes along with something Jean said earlier, but I think it's a good point. Someone said they learned not to push a relationship until trust had been established. Otherwise, you weren't going to get anywhere.
Thank you, Patty. Any other scribe that I've missed?
Yeah, Elaine Chapman.
Elaine Chapman.
A remarkable statement was that as white folks, our culture tends to dominate, and that to be an advocate for others, we need to be present, listen, and learn from their point of view and not impose our own.
Awesome. Thank you, Elaine. And Berta, I thought I saw you wanting to speak.
Yes, Joyce has them, I believe.
Yes, for question 1, and it related to the series on becoming comfortable with being uncomfortable. And one of our participants said that we can measure the strength of our relationships by the number of awkward conversations we have shared. So maybe if you aren't friends enough to share an awkward conversation, you're not friends enough.
Nice. Thank you, Joyce. Well done.
Yes.
And Meredith,
Yes.
I think you're ready now.
Yes, our group was appreciative that the series balanced content as well as the challenge to do self-examination and self-reflection. That it was a well done mix.
Great. Thank you, Meredith. Any other scribes that I've missed? All right, let's go to question number 2. Let's start with Galloway and Mary. what can the center do? Actionable steps.
Well, it was hard to think, but we really focused on moving from the theoretical into action. And there were a couple of very explicit and examples of actions that could be taken. One being that the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee could have at least a monthly or maybe even a bi-monthly report out in the e-newsletter that comes out weekly from the center. That would be really great. And another really was about visuals in the building, that we need to be more inclusive in the visuals that are representing in the building itself.
Great. Thank you, Marion Galloway. Bev Warren, one comment on question 2.
Yes, my group were not necessarily members of the centers, so we were hesitant to offer suggestions when we're not perhaps fully aware of what is going on. But one thing that we did suggest is really paying attention to reducing barriers that may have a negative impact on diversity. Paying money to join, are we on a bus line? Have we partnered with other groups in the area? Is our programming appropriate for inclusion of all? And so it was more of recommending that the center look at, are there barriers that could be reduced that would improve diversity?
Thank you, Bev. John and Diane.
Yes, I had this one, and several members of the group talked about the center working harder at gaining membership, particularly for people of color, and having a deeper response by going out to communities of color on their own turf, and finding, again, what it's similar to what was just said, but what are some of the obstacles? What do they know about the center? Is there anything about it that would interest them, so that they could get involved? Yeah, and that was the salient point.
Great, thank you, Diane. Elaine Chapman, question number 2, one topic.
This is kind of a fun thing. We said have a party, have a social get together, invite people to come together and get to know one another instead of just all the, formalized planning, but have a party.
Great, thanks, Elaine. Virginia and Jean. Jean, you're muted again.
Okay.
There we go.
We focused a lot on programs, and it was, we thought that there should be programs that would be enticing to members and would bring people in. But then in talking about that, we realized we weren't sure what activities people would be interested in. So we said that it was very important to go to the different groups of people that might be interested in, find out what they're interested in, and see if we couldn't do that. I think this is also where we one of the things about the center is that we have such a variety of programs, and everybody thinks of it, their favorite programs as being the ones that surely would be enticing, but they aren't necessarily enticing to everybody. And we also talked about, preventing barriers of money and things like that, which is a very difficult problem to solve. But anyway, so and also it would be, let's see, if it could be more personal, if there's anything that we could do where people were inviting others to, to join them as a special guest or whatever, that we thought that might help.
Great. Thank you, Jean and Virginia. Marie Baker, Ashby Kindler.
I lost it. Oh, there was the suggestion that perhaps the center could coordinate with other groups that are trying to do things like this maybe like the coming to the table group, and do some things together, which would get more people involved and different people involved over a longer period of time, perhaps, and perhaps with more depth.
Thank you, Marie. Enid and Kaki.
So we talked about the things that the center could do in terms of audits and checking the staffing and looking at the architecture and programming and all the things that some of the other individuals have mentioned, and that we should extend a hand of friendship to the community just a little bit more. We can't just expect that because we're here, people will come, that we have to extend that hand of friendship. One interesting thing came out was that this is, the center is very unique in that it gets 60% of its funding from philanthropy. And so the question was, to what extent are we unique in that? And does that have an impact on what goes on at the center? And what implications does that have going forward?
Great, thank you, Enid. And Joyce and Berta.
Joyce, are you there?
Muted. We can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am, we can hear you.
Yes. One of the suggestions was that we have a race-based book group in connection with the center. That wouldn't necessarily have to be made up of African-American members, but an affinity group for those who were interested in discussing this further. And Berta and I did volunteer. There's quite a good collection of African-American based books in the center library.
Right. Thank you, Joyce. And Sharon Petro.
Well, I think everything we talked about has just about been covered. One thing, though, to consider an introductory membership rate for the first year that might attract more people coming into the center. But we did talk about just about everything that has already been presented. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And Patty.
We talked about a lot of things. One, the most important one, is to continue these types of programs and post-COVID to do them in person. So you can actually be sitting across from people, African-American or Asian or people that are participating. But one thing I thought was interesting was that the thought was that the center sponsors a lot of trips. And those are starting to happen now. And wouldn't it be interesting to have trips, day trips in the Virginia area or the DC area that go to the African American Museum in DC and have someone speak to the group, or perhaps the Enslaved Laborers Memorial at the University of Virginia and spend well, you probably wouldn't spend 3 hours, but maybe an hour or two having somebody explain how it was put together and what the history behind all of it was. And then here in our backyard, we've got Monticello, and Colonial Williamsburg is now making an effort to present the African-American slavery story. So just some day trips that people could go and learn more.
Okay. Thank you, Patty. Vincent Walker.
So there's two comments that kind of stood out, and we kind of already reiterated this, but I was just saying that when people are not invited, they don't feel included, and just to actually invite more people of color into the center, to reach out and have more outreach for that. So,
great. Thank you, Vincent.
Okay.
And Meredith Gunter.
I'd like to build on what Vincent just said, and this was also repeated or suggested in an earlier group. Somebody suggested, and this was actually under question 3, but if we formed a coalition with some predominantly Black organizations in town to sponsor, between the center and those organizations, or an organization to sponsor a program or programs, it might be helpful in terms of broadening the audience. But the other thing that came up in our group, I've been in Charlottesville about 25 years, and I am still a come here, obviously, but the people in my group were really more recent come heres. And in fact, one person doesn't even live here, but visits often. So their conversation was more about youth. And we got off on the topic of how the young people's experience of these issues in some cases is different than what those of us with silver hair maybe had experienced in our lifetimes. And that it could be really interesting and a nice mix and kind of energizing to see how to bring youth and youth groups into further discussion of these issues or further programming around these issues in the center.
Thank you, Meredith.
Thank you.
All right. Is there any scribe that I've missed this time?
Oh, Linda Dukes.
Linda.
Linda, oh, sorry, you are there. I missed your name. Sorry, jumped right over you. Linda Dukes, sorry.
One person suggested having some programming around refugees who have settled in Charlottesville and how they perceive Charlottesville.
Great, excellent. Thank you, Linda. All right, so question number 3. How can the greater community take action? Well, let's start with Galloway and Mary.
Okay. We had a little bit of time to talk about this, but the real theme came up in taking personal responsibility and gathering a group of your own personal friends and maybe even relations, and go volunteer for some community good, whatever you all decide to do, some activity that you could take. And an example of that was the food pantry.
Great, thank you, Mary and Galloway. Let's next go to Vincent Walker.
So the couple comments from there. One was just having those tough conversations, white people speaking to other white people about inclusion and equity, having those tough conversations with friends and family, yielding to people of color and hearing them speak about their diversity, what they're experiencing, not being included, not all those type of things, was the 2 comments that I really wanted to get out there. So.
Thank you, Vincent. Bev Warren.
We really struggled with how to offer suggestions for this because as white people, should we be offering the next steps? We want to make sure that those who are most affected by racial bias need to lead. And we thought that perhaps two things. One is to get more natural interactions where we're working together from a level of greater trust than coming together in think tank groups where we don't interact with each other naturally. The other was to really think about housing that is more homogeneous, whether that be special needs, whether it be racial, whether it may be age related, but we need to get outside of our homogeneous environments in Charlottesville.
Thank you, Beverly. And Elaine Chapman.
Someone brought up a point about as individuals to go where people of color are, to visit their businesses, to visit where they are socially, so that we have that natural interaction again.
Thank you, Elaine. And Virginia and Jean Foss. Virginia Porter.
Well, the suggestion that we had was that they were very pleased that we had a Black mayor at this time and felt that that was important and a good positive step in the right direction. And they would like to see encourage more people of other races to be part of the government and be in leadership roles.
Thank you, Jean. And Enid Krieger, Khaki Brooks.
Well, one of the suggestions was to invest in Black-owned businesses around town. But a major suggestion, and we had several, was to get actively engaged in the things that are important, like the voting laws. That we have to stand up and speak out against these kinds of things and be active. Have a vision and have a vision of what real progress looks like. You know, take it to our schools and take it to whatever we do. But we need to be actively engaged in progress.
Thank you, Enid. Diane and John.
One thing that was interesting there was a fair amount of frustration and anger that white participants had because there was so little of Black history that they had learned when they were coming up, and they were angry about the lack of history. So in contrast to that, one participant was particularly pleased that the school system now is doing a much better job of educating the students as they come through, the younger students, about Black history. So the suggestion of how to improve was do a better job then of reaching out to parents so that parents get caught up in the better, richer information about our more inclusive history.
Thank you, John. Joyce and Berta.
One of our suggestions was that in our future speaker series, we include students, both Black and white, from the university to talk about their experiences there and what it's like to be a student, a college student in Charlottesville.
Thank you, Joyce. Sharon Petro.
One comment was that a lot of good things are going on in our community, but maybe we don't know about them. So improving publicity of what good things are happening to remind people that they could get involved might be a progressive step.
Great. Thank you, Sharon. And Meredith Gunter.
Our group felt that the series has really helped curate resources for us and issues through which white people can become educated, self-reflect, and act. And more curation of that, I think Enid sort of referenced this in the comments from her group. You know, what are the issues that are hot in this area that people can be involved in, and where do they do that? And then another thing that came up was a sort of defensiveness that can arise as white people start to address diversity, and the fear of becoming a minority in the world as white people. And I think that the data, the population data, and a group I used to work with at the university did some work on this. And you know, increasingly people are identifying themselves as multiracial on the census. And so it actually is, and the numbers are in fact changing, but also how we identify is changing. And so, you know, it sometimes gets blown up to be bigger and more dramatic than we actually think it is, but it's a subtle revolution that's going on in the way we think about ourselves.
Thank you, Meredith. And Linda Dukes.
Well, most of the things were already mentioned, but encourage white people to support Black-owned businesses, Black-led organizations, and go where Black people are.
Thank you, Linda. Patty Carey.
Well, the one idea we came up with is a little bit of an answer for question 2 and 3. And with the new deputy city manager for equity and inclusion that was just named, I think early this week or late last week, there was some discussion about the center offering to meet with her and maybe partner with her or ally with her in some way to help solve this problem or provide some insight.
Great. Thank you, Patty. So that concludes our round with the scribes sharing individual ideas from each group. Next, we'd like to spend about 10 minutes hearing from folks in general who are not the scribes. Any other thoughts or comments that you'd like to be sure that we hear about today? Yes.
Marie, you forgot me.
Oh, Marie, I'm sorry.
But
I'll hear that again. Thank you.
No, you won't, I promise.
Okay, good. Okay, good.
No, but I really wanted to talk about this one because I think it's kind of interesting. The question was, what kind of recommendation would we make to the community or for that might become steps that could be taken? And there was a suggestion that the school systems used to take, or one of them used to take people on trips around the city as for new teachers, and that kind of thing could perhaps be reinstated for teachers come from other places, but for the teachers who are here too, to learn more about the broader community and where their kids come from and where where they live. But I thought that was a good way to at least have teachers have a little bit of an understanding of what home is like for teachers. And another suggestion was to have, I'm doing two.
That's fine. Go ahead, Marie.
To have Jordy and Jalen speak together. That they're, one doing history and one doing all, and Jordy doing all that other kind of work on redlining and margining off where people lived that might be of interest to a lot of people, not only of interest, but just expand their knowledge about what happened here.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Marie.
Thank you.
If I can piggyback off what Marie said, I would like to say what I said in my group.
Yes.
I'm Nadra. I am the DEI coordinator at the United Way of Greater Charlottesville. The most important thing for me getting out of this series and all the reading and literature I've been exposed to, the one thing that all of you can do, the most important, crucial thing that you can do is speak to your peers, your family members. It's very important that white people talk to white people about this and why it's important. And that is the starting place, I believe.
Thank you, Nidra, and thanks for bringing that from your group, from your comment. Thank you. Someone else, we have about 9 more minutes to just open discussion from anyone, things that we haven't talked about yet.
It's Berta, and
go ahead, Berta.
One of the suggestions was that some of the activities may not be as exciting for people at the center. And one of the things that was suggested was perhaps a solo line dancing group. And doesn't it sound like fun? And that would not be an awful thing to do.
Thank you, Roberta.
Well,
Frank,
Denise does. There is a group called Moving to the Rhythm that actually meets on Tuesdays at 3:30 with Denise, and it's primarily Black African class, and she is an African dancer. Actually, she studied in Africa, and she's an African dancing teacher, and she bases a lot of her moves on that style, and it is fun. So, and she does everything with soul music. So there actually is a group that does do that.
Wonderful. That sounds wonderful. If they can do a little bit of publicity on it, what a good idea.
I'll tell Denise.
Thank you.
It's a good way.
Frank,
this is Virginia. I have to piggyback on what was that Brenda, who just made that comment. Denise's class is a great class. She's a great instructor. She's done jazzercise for 20 years or so, and I just call her the Energizer Bunny. So anyone who comes to join her class, you'll have fun. She tries different things, different music, genre of music, but it's kind of based on kind of old soul stuff.
All Motown.
But yeah, Motown.
Yeah.
Maxine is a part of it. So please, we were all thinking of how could her program be promoted, because you never hear her program being promoted.
So Virginia, do you know? Virginia, does that meet periodically or regularly?
Every Tuesday at 3:30. is online as well as on site,
And what time is that?
3:30 to 4:30.
On Tuesdays. All right, so now we have 50 people that can pass the word. So
Great.
Frank Dukes, you had your hand up. Thanks for waiting.
Thank you. Thanks all. Just briefly to add to Nidra, or support what Nidra said, the idea that we all can be doing where we are doing it, right? In our neighborhoods, in our places of worship, we all need to do that. But I also, following with the being comfortable with being uncomfortable, to acknowledge that the center, which was the senior center, has had a legacy and a reputation of being a white centered group, right? Of being a privileged group. And we talked about that in our conversation. And that, like all other institutions, the idea of doing an equity audit, we all need to be doing that, but certainly that's something the center could be doing, and looking at what constitutes repair for that history. So being accountable for that history and what constitutes repair for that history, including looking at reparations and the other broad elements of that.
Agreed, Frank. And you should know by now, my name is Nadra.
Sorry, Nadra, so sorry.
It's okay.
Nadra,
Thank
thanks.
you.
Somebody else, any other thoughts that you want to share?
Well,
Maxine.
Jim mentioned that there was no African art or anything being shown, but isn't this month, there's a woodwork all around the center that's based on African and art. It's amazing. So I told him to go look at it because it's definitely well worth it. And it should be promoted to the community to come in and look at that. And that might be another way to get some members.
Great, excellent. So the art is up, at least this time.
Frank Walker. Mm-hmm.
Frank Walker's art, yes.
Everyone should take a look. It's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And Maxine, you had your hand up. You're muted right now, Maxine. Maxine, you're muted.
After 10 o'clock.
There you go.
There you go.
Okay.
So we can hear you now. Oh, now we can't
Nope,
hear you.
now you're muted.
You got muted again, Maxine.
Now you're unmuted. You're good.
Okay, so we were talking about Denise's class at 3:30 on Tuesdays, and Enid was a part of that too. I didn't want to leave her out.
Thank you, Maxine.
Thank you, Maxine.
Anytime, that class is a real barn burner.
Great. Someone else? Other thoughts?
Well, I'd like to say something.
Yes.
Piggyback on what Frank was talking about as far as the center. I can remember, thinking the center is, for white people, not for a person of color. So when I retired, I know Peter by way of his wife, Barbara, from the Darden School. And I had conversations with Barbara, about the center. And I thought, I'm gonna go over there and see what they have to offer and that sort of thing. And I found, I went to the line dancing class. Dot was living at that time. She was very welcoming and she made me feel very comfortable. I didn't feel odd because I was the only Black person in the room, but because I've been in that kind of situation before, so but I enjoyed the class, and then I kept coming. And then as I was going, I'm also interested in exercise. So there are things, exercise classes, but there still need to be more things to offer for people of color, as well as having instructors, people of color instructors, running some of the programs. One of the other things I thought about, I believe the university at the beginning of the year or sometime, they get together and they get all their dates together and they get with all the stakeholders and stuff. And so that, when they have graduations to intervene with some other thing that's going on that particular day, maybe the center could be pulled in and maybe, piggyback on some of the programs at the Jefferson School or with the university, the descendants, there's the memorial, all of that, so that the center will have those dates, know what's going on in the community, and be able to come up with some programs or piggyback, have them at the center, pull some into the center to draw other people in.
Thank you, Virginia. A lot of cross support you're talking about with different groups working together.
Yes.
So Nadra, you had a couple things in the chat. Did you want to speak to those, or shall we read those out loud?
Well, I have been getting emails from the president's office at UVA. There is a memorial dedication ceremony to enslaved laborers on Friday, April 9th, at 12 p.m. There's a moment of silence honoring the enslaved. Now, at 6 p.m. on Friday, the inaugural Descendants Day panel is having a discussion. On Saturday, April 10th at 11 o'clock, there's a dedication ceremony. And at 7 o'clock at night on Saturday, the group, I'm probably dating myself, but Take 6 is having a concert, and I'm really excited about that. And then at 8:30, they're visiting with people backstage. So if you're interested and you want to mingle with us, come on out. Let's do this.
And Nadra, these are in-person events, Zoom
Yes.
events? Great. So
Wait,
all
hold
those-
on, let me make sure. I don't want to misspeak. Wait a minute.
Now I have for the 11 o'clock on Saturday, I think that's a Zoom. I have virtual.
Yeah, there can't be that many in-person events.
No, these are all virtual. These are all virtual.
Okay, on Saturday, it's a broadcast at 11. And Take 6 is, yes, it's online.
Yes, virtual.
Okay, so everything's online because of COVID. My bad.
And Frank
But
Dukes just,
come,
thank
that'll
you.
make it easier for you to get there. Meet Black people. You guys need Black people in your life. Let's do this.
Thank you, Nadra,
I
for all
know
those.
you already have some, but let's get some more.
And Frank Dukes is supporting Nadra's announcements with a website, major events at UVA. So take a look in the
great.
take a look in the chat. You'll find that. If
I
you'd
love
like.
you, Frank.
Anyone else? Any thoughts that you'd like to share?
On April 28th, the Congregation B'nai Israel is doing, and it's a virtual, it's about racism and racial injustice, and it's going to be online, and I can get Carolyn the link, and if whoever wants to go on and register can. And I think it's important because I've been going on to their seminars, which has been very much like these. It's been very interesting that this has all come up at the same time. So I think that that would be a good thing to do.
And Carolyn, you've been collecting information the last little while this evening. Do you have those events or those things that the center publishes to the center members?
So I was just going to say, Brenda, if you want to, anybody send that information to me, we can see if we can get that in the newsletter as an announcement. Love to do that.
And Frank put that website
Yep,
in the
Major
chat.
Events Virginia schedule.
Okay.
I would just like to share and thank Enid so much for putting this together. Yeah, thank you, Enid.
You're welcome. I was
And-
going to thank all of you.
Well, it's time, Enid. We're going to move from
Is it
this
time?
conversation to you with some closing comments.
Okay, so we've come to the end of the series. And so thank you for thanking me. But on behalf of Peter Thompson, our Executive Director, and the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, I really like to thank each of our presenters, each of our scribes, all of you, everyone who has participated and been interested and active in this program. Over the past 3 years, the Center at Belvedere has awakened to a new consciousness. They are actually committed to a full and active effort at diversity, equity, and inclusion. We've done so many assessments and surveys and all kinds of things to find out where the problem is and where the bones are buried. And we are getting ready to work with a consultant group out of Richmond for a strategic plan to address these issues. I'm pleased to be a part of all of that, and I thank you all for joining us on the journey. So where do we go next? First, keep your eye on the center calendar of events. because there may be some very interesting programs in your future. Next, visit the center website and listen again or for the first time to the first 2 speaker series that we had over the past couple of years. There were outstanding speakers in those programs as well. And what I'd like to see people do is to link those presentations to this series and share them with others. Your church, your boards, your meeting places, wherever you are. Continue these discussions whenever you can in your own circles. I think all of us agree that talking to each other is one of the ways that we can address the problem. We can support Black-owned businesses or organizations like AATF, the African American Heritage Center, or the NAACP. All of these Black organizations that are having events around town. Definitely try to attend some of those things that Nadra just referenced. And also you might read and educate yourselves by joining the African American Authors Book Club, which will soon be meeting at the center just as soon as it's safe to meet in person. We can give you more information about that if you like to. But most importantly, I think that we have to speak out, that white people have to speak out against prejudice, stereotypes, hatred, political and legal bias. Even if it's uncomfortable, you got to speak out about that. I've been looking at that commercial on television, you know, the one they have about, we're all in this together. I love that commercial. It has something to do with COVID, you know, support the businesses and things. But the truth of the matter is that we are all in this together. And we can get through it in our little place, our little piece of the world, if we would all just keep talking about it, talk it up, and act. Talk is good, but act is better. Action is much better. So I thank you all for enjoying this program. Thanks so much for being here. Carolyn, you close it out.
I close it up?
Yes.
I think.
That wasn't in the script, was it?
Yes.
Well,
yeah, it says
Anyway.
closing.
Okay, well, thank you. And if you made a suggestion or a comment on one of those 1, 2, or 3, and it wasn't read, rest assured, all of that will come to us. And Enid and I and the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Committee will amass those together and really consider and make recommendations. I will say that a lot of the things about trips and things like that, it's really heartening to hear what you're asking for, what you would like to see, and that we have also thought of that and are working on that as well. So, and we're eager to partner with anyone who is interested in forwarding our mission here at the center and in Charlottesville. And so we're here for you, and thank you for being here for us. We take this seriously, and we want to have fun doing it too, I'd say. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bob.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Bob.
Thank you, all the scribes.
Thank you, scribes.
All
Absolutely.
the scribes, you were wonderful. Thank you.
Yes.